I can go ahead and start introducing. Um, we're very fortunate to have with us today uh, Dr. David Kirschman, who is a neurosurgeon. So you know him, and he knows you from his years as a neurosurgeon. And he is the CEO and founder of Aerobiotics. And if you see these machines that are sitting around this room today and in the exhibit room, Aerobiotics brought those here to help us have clean air during this procedure. During the procedure today. So we appreciate them doing that. Uh, Dr. Kirschman, he says is a former neurosurgeon, but to me that's like saying you're a former nurse. When you are a nurse, you're always a nurse, because even if you're not working in a hospital anymore, you still got friends and neighbors, and you're still taking care of a lot of people. So I think once a surgeon, always a surgeon. Um, He's the chief scientific officer for Aerobiotics, and he actually invented this machine. And I understand from talking to Trisha last night that he has a lot of other things that he's done as well. Um, he's from Colorado. Do you still live in Colorado? He's in Ohio right now, but we like Colorado. So we're going to let him say a few words for you. And we are very thankful for Aerobiotics sponsoring this session with Bill, and very fortunate to have him here to say hello to you.
All right, thank you so much, Brenda. So we do exist. There are actually some surgeons that care about air quality in the OR and smoke and that sort of thing. There are some of us. We have to breathe it too. We have to breathe it too. So thank you so much. Just going to give some introductory remarks here before we go into Bill's full talk here. And what I just wanted to talk about here is safety is at the heart of advocacy, and we're working so hard with AORN to advocate for perioperative nurses, and we want to emphasize the importance of partnership between the AORN and the local chapters and industry to provide safe environments for patients and the perioperative team. Not just us, but all the other companies that are here. We all want to work together to make safe environments and advocate, both in the, in the organization itself, and then also nationally and in state houses and these sorts of things. We appreciate the opportunity to sponsor. Our goal is to work with perioperative nurses to continue to advance technology. And we talked about in that great presentation we just looked at, we still have a ways to go to look at different technologies, look at how we can advance science and make safer environments for everybody. But we've got a long way to go, and that's one of the things I wanted to say is smoke evacuation. I hate to tell you, but smoke evacuation is just the beginning. It's just the beginning, and I'll explain why. So smoke evacuation, as important as it is at the surgical field, is just one stop on the road to better OR working environments. We need a holistic approach to better OR environments in the future, because we have a lot of things to consider outside of just surgical smoke at the site. Bioaerosols arising from aerosol generating procedures. These include intubation, extubation, and even breathing of the patient during monitored anesthesia care type procedures. These release bacterial and viral bioaerosols, which obviously in today's day and age of COVID is important. We have to talk about waste anesthetic gases that are significant. These leak out during the procedure, these leak out during extubation, and there's very significant health effects from these waste anesthetic gases. Volatile organic compounds don't just come from electric cautery, but they also come from things like bone cement mixing, from skin preparation solutions, and from disinfectants that are used in the OR. There's a residual smoke. So depending upon the smoke evacuation system being used, up to only about 50% of smoke can actually be collected at the site. You still have significant residual smoke that manages to make it out into the periphery of the room, that tends to linger in the room during turnover, affecting environmental services. And so, so there's other areas that are important. Another thing is cardiac heater cooler admissions for those of you who've done cardiac surgery and pump cases where you have heater coolers that generate non-tuberculous mycobacteria. There's been significant surgical site infections that are associated with that. And the other thing that needs to be discussed is the coupling of environmental safety with SSI risk reduction. With our technology specifically, if we can reduce the bacterial bioburden in the whole room, and where does that bacteria come from? Well, it comes from a lot of times the people in the room. And we need to be talking about that, because if we can show, as we've shown, if you can reduce the bacterial level in the air in the room, you can reduce the incidence of SSI, particularly in cases like joint replacement. And so as we work hard to get these technologies into ORs, we need to show a financial incentive to the hospital to do so. And by showing that we can couple these technologies with SSI reduction, well, that creates a very strong economic impact and economic benefit for the hospital, not just a cost that's thrown on top. So if we can do that, that'll make our advocacy so much easier. And as was mentioned before, building the importance of real-time OR environmental monitoring. It's one thing to clean an environment, but you need to know the environment, know how much VOCs people are being exposed to, knowing how much particulate is in the room in real time, and being able to monitor, record, and report those sorts of things. So we know what's actually going on inside these ORs. We can't just, close the door and hope everything's okay. So with that, I just want to end my remarks. Thank you very much. We look forward to the keynote speaker, and we'll be around the Aerobiotics booth next door, and please feel free to stop by if you have any additional questions. Thank you.
Well, our next speaker is one who, again, probably doesn't need any introduction. And he is also someone who is, where did he go? Oh, near and dear to my heart.
Every great woman is a man. So
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Bill has worked in hospitals as hospital manager. He has been on ARN's board of directors. He was on my board of directors. He was ARN's president, and he's currently on the ARN board of directors at the national level now because he believes so strongly in you, the membership, and how important it is for you to have a voice in our practice and in our association. And that's why people pulled him out of his retirement, where he's now teaching in a university. He didn't really retire, but it recruited him back to be on the board, because I know without question, without ever talking to Bill, that if he makes a decision related to practice and perioperative nursing, that it is going to be a decision to benefit you, the member, and patients at the local level. I know that without question because I know Bill. Now, how many of you do a timeout before you start surgery? Do you know where that came from? Bill Duffy really is the father of timeout. It's one of the things that he did early on. He's not going to tell you that, but as I said with earlier people, it's important to acknowledge the contributions that you make and that we make every day in the practice and in professional nursing. The other thing that I want to give Bill before he starts his presentation, and I was looking through, do y'all remember this? I don't know which Congress it was, but I was looking through my old Congress memorabilia and found the timeout towel. Now, what am I going to do with that? I'm going to give it to Professor Duffy in case you did not get one. So you're in for a treat. If you haven't heard Bill, you're going to love him. And if you have heard him, you're going to love him. So help me welcome Bill Duffy.
well, I thought she was going to be holding that up when my talk was going over, to say time out. I'm gonna turn my lavalier on. Thanks. All right. So is that good? I do have the clicker right here. And Brenda, thank you for that. It's not too often that you get introduced by the goddess of smoke either. So that's great. Oh, look at that. How nice. And that is what my beard would look like if I actually grew one. Hey, so today, right now, I'm going to tell you a story. And it's actually our story. And it is a story that is rooted in the heart of what we do, which is advocacy. We are the one profession that is in the hospital saying that we are the patient's advocate. And really, our story is really about advocacy, not only for our patients, but also for ourselves and our profession. And I think it's a critical time for us to have this story because, right now, I believe that every generation of nurses has the job of owning our profession. And as we become nurses and we're in the practice environment, our job is to make sure that the profession stays healthy and strong for the next generation of nurses, who will be the ones who will be caring for us. So there's a little bit of a personal issue for us there, but for the next generation of nurses. And that has been the way it has been since Florence Nightingale. But it's more critical right now for us because right now we are going through this age of disruption in healthcare, and we'll talk about that in a second. So it's important for us to pause for a second and to look at the value and celebrate our value of what we do. Now, as I said, we are the profession that claims to be the patient's advocate. And the word profession comes from the Latin word profere, which means I promise. And what happened back in ancient Rome, people would stand on whatever, a piece of rock or something, and they would speak to the people in the marketplace saying, I will build, I'm a carpenter, I will build this for you, or I'm a bricklayer, or I'm a painter, or whatever. And they would profess out to the people in the marketplace to say, this is what I'm going to do. And it was their promise to the people in the marketplace. As nurses, we took our first profession when we took the Nightingale Oath. When we were leaving nursing school and we made a promise, we professed out into the public how we were going to act and how we were going to treat and care for our patients. And, that promise has really been the heart of what we do then as we move forward into our practice. But I think it's time, and the Romans were smart about this as well, is that I think it's time that we sit back and reflect. Because of this age of disruption, we're going through a little bit of crisis in healthcare. And the Romans had a god called Janus, which is what January is, the month of January is named after. And January was a two-headed god, one looking forward into the future and one looking back at the past. And I think it's important for us to look at our past as we look forward to our future, because again, we are dealing with this age of disruption and we have to be able to find a way to make sure we keep our profession healthy for the next generation of nurses. And why do I say that? Well, because, this was a survey that was taken pre-COVID. I wonder what it would look like now if we did this same survey. But while 91% of nurses in this survey said they were satisfied with their career and their role, it's interesting that 31% of them, 3 out of 10, are thinking about leaving the profession. And again, this is before the COVID crisis. There's 3 million nurses in the United States. That's 1 million nurses who are thinking about no longer being a nurse. And just how can our profession stay healthy if we have that happen? But also, how can we provide care to those we serve? And it strikes me as really an interesting dichotomy here, because while 3 out of 10 nurses are thinking about leaving the profession, the public who we serve, year after year after year, rate us as the most trusted and the most respected profession. In the last 20-some years, there's only one time when nursing wasn't the #1 most respected, and that was 2001 when the firefighters took it over with what happened after 9/11. But after that, nursing again goes right back up to the top. And so we have those we serve who love and admire us, but we have our own internal discussions about whether or not this is a profession people want to pursue. And I think part of the problem is because what's happening in healthcare right now. We have 2 great disruptions that are occurring in our profession. One is the debate about how we're going to provide care to our citizens. Is healthcare a right or is healthcare a privilege? And then the other great disruptor we have is obviously COVID-19 and the argument about who should wear a mask and who should get a shot. And in the middle of all that, the backbone of our healthcare system, which is nursing, has to somehow hold it together to provide quality care to their patients, to be able to advocate for them, to be able to advance their health when all this disruption is going on. Winston Churchill once said, "Leave it to the Americans to do the right thing after they tried everything else." And I think that we are going through the after we tried everything else stage and proving Churchill right. But you know what? Despite the noise, our work really matters. And I love this picture because I really do think that we do belong down the hallway of superheroes, and we should have the Hulk and Superman giving us a little bow of attention because, as I said, we're the ones who are working to hold this system together while all this change and disruption is happening. So today, in this talk, we're going to pause, stop the noise a little bit, and we're going to try to celebrate the power that we have and the beauty that we bring as nurses in our celebration. Now, years ago, before our iPhones and before the internet, before Facebook, people used to look and see signs, and they would say, "Oh, you know, that's a sign from God." And people say, "Well, God doesn't speak to us anymore." And I guess he needs to get a Facebook account or something. But really, I think there are signs still out there. We're just too distracted and too busy to see them. And with all the noise that is happening around us, I think it's important for us that we stop and we pause and we look at the signs of what value we bring and how we help change the world for those that we serve and for ourselves and for our profession. And so we're going to take a little journey looking at our past as we look forward to what our future can be and will be as the owners of the profession and how we move it forward. So we all know the story of Florence Nightingale and the 38 nurses who, you know, were sent to the Crimean War because the British were losing so many soldiers, not from bullets from Russian soldiers, but from disease and infections. And so the public was so outraged that the government did a publicity stunt by sending these 40 nurses to the Crimea. And they didn't really expect anything to change, but at least they could say to the public that they did something. Well, they didn't count on Florence and her nurses, who, you know, if you think about it, when they got there and they saw the pestilence and the filth and the pus and the way the soldiers are being cared for, I'm surprised they didn't turn around and run back to the boat and sail back to England. But they stayed and they changed things and they used scientific methods and they fought the patriarchy of the military establishment, and the death rate and the infection rate dropped drastically and the soldiers survived. And in the century after that, Florence started the first secular school of nursing, and then American nurses followed along. They started the secular schools, and we had this century of progress where women who finally had an opportunity to go out into society and make a difference. Prior to Florence, nursing was looked on as a bottom end job that no woman of stature would have taken. And then after Florence and after this century, and the doors opened up and women rushed into this opportunity to contribute to society. And we changed the way healthcare was provided in that century. But then we had to overcome these obstacles to do this. And the key thing I want to talk about here is that these nurses, all of us, all of them are just like us. They are the same as we were. We were people who went into the profession and we said, let's make a difference. And so if they can do it, we can do it. We can make a difference. We could get smoke legislation passed. We could do time out. We can make the way surgery is performed around the world because these are these nurses were the same as us. But here, I love this. This was an ad for a nurse in 1920 for nursing training. And the thing I loved was right away, it was a physician-approved program. You know, so it wasn't, we had to get the doctor's approval to have this program. You didn't have to have a high school education to be a nurse back then. So clearly it was just teaching the technical aspect. And you know what? You can make $35 a week. We make $35 in 45 minutes now. I mean, just think of how have we come in 100 years. And the best of all is that one nurse from this program is a supervisor at a 10-bed hospital. So we're making progress there. Besides the patriarchy that we had to overcome sexism. I mean, you all know this character. This is Major Margaret Houlihan, an officer in the Nurse Corps in Korea during World War II in the MASH TV series. And for those of you who saw the original movie and then the TV show, she was the butt of sexual comments and jokes, right? They were brutal to her, and American audiences thought it was funny. But the beauty of this is that Loretta Swit, the actress, and the nurses across the country advocated for the change of this, that by those of you who watched the show towards the end, she was no longer called Hot Lips. She was called Margaret, and her counsel and her advice was sought after by the doctors in the treatment of the soldiers. A total change occurred on that show where she went from being an object of sexual jokes to a trusted colleague welcomed into the council of the surgeons. For those of us who are male nurses, we had to deal with the question about our sexual orientation, or why weren't we yet smart enough to go to medical school? You know, and you know, this came out in a movie with Gaylord Fokker, who was being questioned by his fiance's father about why wasn't he good enough to become a doctor. But for years, because of our advocacy and our caring, that discussion has moved to the side, and men have been welcomed and respected into the profession. And we just had a male president of the American Nurses Association. Our colleagues of race. 60 years ago, they couldn't train in the same nursing schools as their white counterparts. They had to work in separate hospitals. And when they did get the right to work in the same hospitals, they got paid at a different rate of pay. But they overcame that through their caring and through their advocacy to become and have an equal place with us in the profession now. And again, once again, we've had an African-American man be the ANA president, and we've had several African-American nurses who have been ANA presidents. So they have earned their place into our profession. But all of these are examples where they advocated for and didn't take the status quo, but they made change happen. Despite all that, we still have challenges ahead. And we have a history of solving those challenges. Clara Barton was a nurse during the Civil War. She lived in Washington, D.C. President Lincoln was so distressed when he's hearing reports about the suffering of Union soldiers, he asked the citizens of Washington to help gather supplies to go out and help care for the Union soldiers. Miss Barton responded to that, got a group of friends, they got a wagon load of supplies, they went out to, you know, depending on if you're north or south, the Battle of Bull Run or Manassas, you know, but they went out to Bull Run, and they were shocked to find that soldiers were still laying in the field wounded weeks after the battle happened. So what she did, she went back home, got another group of people, and they started going out into the field, providing care to those soldiers, and then carrying them to the hospital tents so that they could start getting treatment. And she created an organization she called the American Red Cross, and it is still helping Americans today. A nurse did that. The nurses in the military during the start of World War II in the Philippines, 77 nurses. The United States Navy was going to evacuate them when it looked like the Philippines were going to fall. And these nurses refused to be evacuated. They were going to stay with the soldiers that they were caring for. They voluntarily went into captivity so that they can continue to care for those soldiers. And they had a patient to nurse ratio of 100 to 1. When I was a chief nursing officer, I would say, I promise you, I will never give you a 100 to 1 patient ratio. So stop complaining about 5 to 1. But these nurses survived 700 calories a day, limited medicines, limited food, limited water, and they did not lose a patient to infection. Their sacrifice made such an impression on the military and the soldiers that it changed the way women were looked at as officers and as soldiers in our armed forces. One of my personal favorite heroes is Margaret Sanger, who found a way to help women that have careers that many of you are celebrating now. She was a public health nurse in New York City, and she would make her weekly rounds and find that patients that she had been caring for have either died because they were pregnant and went and got a backstreet abortion and got an infection, or it was botched, or the children that she was also seeing died because they were starving to death. The parents couldn't afford to feed them. They had so many kids. And so she championed the fact that we can do something about developing birth control methods. And Margaret Sanger created two organizations, excuse me, the World Population Conference, and then she started Planned Parenthood, which is still around today, helping women across the country be able to get access to health care that they might not otherwise get access to. And she was a champion for the development of the birth control pill, which freed women from being a career of just being in the house and being a mother to having a balance of being a mother and be able to have a professional career. And as a father of three daughters, she is the one who's helped my daughters have the chance to make their difference and their contribution to society that may not have been happened to them if someone didn't advocate for that. A nurse did this. And as we fought over that century from the 1900s or back into 1870s up to now, as we gained and advocated for change and made improvements in patient care and made improvements in the science of healthcare, came professional recognition, where we went from making 5 cents a day to now in 2020 making almost $80,000 a year as an average salary. And probably with the pandemic, that number is going to be in 2021 much higher than that. But people don't pay for things that they don't value. Clearly, we have shown, despite the challenges that we had to overcome with sexism and race and patriarchy, we've been able to show our value and to gain the respect of those that we work with and those that we serve. And the change happens again. We, perioperative nurses, were the ones who said, wait a second, we gotta stop cutting off the wrong legs and doing the wrong surgery. And when the Joint Commission came out with its NEVER event, the Joint Commission just said, stop doing it. They didn't say how, they just said, hey, stop cutting off the wrong leg. And so some hospitals were putting the mark on the leg they're going to do surgery on. Some hospitals were putting a mark on the leg they weren't going to do surgery on, and it was a mess. So we, ARN, were the ones who said, let's develop one standard method. Then we went out and we convinced the American College of Surgeons, we convinced the Society of Anesthesiologists, the Surgical Tech Society, the American Hospital Association, and the Joint Commission to endorse our plan. And then each one of you went into your hospitals and you advocated to get this put in place. And we changed the way healthcare is provided around the globe. I was speaking in China and they gave me a tour of a hospital, and that is up in their operating rooms in China. They are practicing the timeout, just like we are in our American hospitals. The one thing we weren't smart enough, we didn't write a book. Atul Gawande wrote the book, and he's now a multi-billionaire because he decided to write the book. Wasn't smart enough, but that's something we as nurses did. So our progress has been earned. Each generation of nurses have fought a fight to be able to earn our place. Where we are right now, where our profession stands, has been on the backs of our advocacy to make change. But we have a new set of challenges that are coming, and we need our profession to answer that call. So let's look at what we do and how our advocacy makes a difference as we move towards the challenges that we have to solve. And here I'm going to share a little bit of my Irish heritage and my faith, because I believe that we as nurses are part of what the Irish would call a thin place. And a thin place is, the Irish believe that the difference between heaven and earth is 3 feet, just outside our reach, and it's hidden from us by a veil. And We also believe that there are places in the world or moments in time when that distance is narrowed and the veil is lifted and we get to experience a little bit of heaven on earth. And this is a picture from my daughter Katie's wedding. And after the wedding, here we have all, friends and family celebrating this new couple start. And you can see in the background, the American flag is just laying in limp. Her and her husband, Matt, turned and kissed. And all of a sudden, her veil went up. And all my family, all the Irish in the audience was, oh, a thin place, a thin place. Well, for those of you who know my wife, she's Filipino, so her side of the family didn't know what we were talking about. And his side of the family, so we spent the whole cocktail hour trying to explain the concept of a thin place. But in the Irish belief, heaven is a place where you're surrounded by love, and hell is the absence of love. And so here was a wedding with a new couple starting their life together, surrounded by friends, surrounded by love. And so it didn't surprise us that a thin place would occur from our faith. And so here's the official definition of thin place. And I want you to think about it from the terms of what we do as healthcare. It talks about being a port in the storm of life. When people come to us, something's going on with their body, right? The body's being ravaged by cancer or by arthritis or by a cataract or by something. And they're coming into this port, this hospital, to be able to get repaired and refurbished so they can continue their journey on life. It's a stopping place where men and women are given a pause to wonder. And if we ever think about it, how many people are laying in a hospital preoperative holding area negotiating with God? Can that biopsy be negative? If you give me this chance again, I'm going to be this. They're facing mortality for the first time, and they're about to go into a room where they're going to give total control of their body to strangers. You don't think that they're pausing and wondering about what's going to happen and where it can go? So it really probes the core of the human heart, and there's this hunger to be connected. And who is the person who can connect with them? Us. We're the one whose touch, or this little reassuring thing, or the sitting down and talking to them before they go under anesthesia. This is where we have the opportunity to make a thin place happen to our patients. Now, as a chief nursing officer, I would get tens of letters from patients about the care they received. And not one of them wrote and said, that nurse gave me the best shot ever, or that pill passing was perfect. No. They wrote about how we, in this moment of disruption in the patient's lives, we advocated for them by just making them feel a little bit more human in the most dehumanizing period of someone's life. That's what patients remember. And that's the opportunity, the special gift that we have as nurses. In this time of disruption and despair in patients' lives, we get to be there and to help them. It used to drive me nuts when I would hear my nurses say, oh, I did 10 cataracts today, or I did 3 knees. We didn't do 10 cataracts. We didn't do 3 knees. We helped 10 people see. We helped 10 people walk without being in pain. That's what we do. You can talk a surgery, that's a technical thing. That's not, yes, we're technically sound, but we're also scientists and we're also caring professionals. And so the whole package comes. Someone's going to see better because we were there, we made sure that everything went well, the surgery went fine, they didn't get an infection, they had sterile instruments, and we made sure the timeout happened and we were doing the right things that were going for them. We were their voice when they could not speak for themselves. That's the heart of what we do. Don't let anybody tell you that your job is defined by how many minutes your turnover happens or how many cases you get done in a day. What we do is we change people's lives, not only the patient's life, but just think about the family member who's dealing with that person who has arthritis, who can't walk, who's in constant pain. And when you're in pain, you're not a very good company. And then you can't go out and you do things. Now we help them walk again. Not only do we change the patient's life, we change the family's life. What a powerful contribution to the world. So, in my faith, there's a quote from the Bible, and it's from John 15:13. It says, "Greater love have no man than this, than to lay down his life for his friends." And I think about this in the terms of us as nurses. How often do we lay down part of our lives? How many holidays did you have to work because disease doesn't take the holiday off? How many Christmases? How many times did you have to leave your child's birthday party because your beeper went off and you had to get into the hospital? You know, each nurse lays down part of their lives, particularly during this pandemic. How many nurses, there's stories of nurses who would go home and next thing they were thinking about is, how do I get back to help my rest of my teammates take care of these patients who are flooding into our operating room? We didn't run away from the problem, we ran towards the problem. Sometimes isolating ourselves from our family and our children to be able to protect them while we worked to help those recover from the crisis. If this is not what John was speaking about, I don't know what is, because it is a dedication of sacrifice as a nurse to be able to have that opportunity to care, but knowing that we are giving something else up on our family side. You know, we have this opportunity to leave a sign in our patients about the good work that we do. You know, we leave scars with people, but it's a sign of us helping them. This is a picture, for those of you who know, that's my wife Chick on the left, and my daughter Patty, who's a family nurse practitioner. They went on a mission trip to help those who might not be able to get access to healthcare. And they had so many patients and they didn't have enough first assistance. So Patty, because she was the family nurse practitioner, was pulled out of the recovery room where she was assessing and discharging patients to do surgery. And Chick was livid. She had said, "I've been in the operating room for 30 years. She's in there one day and she gets to close." And you can see the little mother finger. See the little mother finger in the right hand as she's trying to tell her how to do the tying. But you know, your work, you know, the suture line and the scar that we leave patients is our artist signature, right? Years ago, they used to call surgery an art. Now it's become a business model, but it used to be, you know, to go in and to repair this creation, this unique being that will never be duplicated again. You get to go in there and you get to touch them and work on them and put them back together, and then we sign it with our signature, and that person goes on and has a better life. I believe this person had was a child who had this huge hernia. You know, now he's going to have a chance to be able to walk around his village and look like a normal person and not have to worry about potential bowel obstructions or other things. And when he sees that scar, hopefully he thinks about the nurses and the doctors who came and dedicated their time to be able to make him have a better life. We have the opportunity through our advocacy to present life and death. I know that there are people who are alive because I was a nurse and I looked at the data and said, something's squirrely, something's going on with this patient. And I chose to make the phone call, right? Or the ones who called the rapid response team, or the ones when we did a cold blue and we were there and we performed CPR. People, I'm sure all of you have that same story where people's lives are different because we used our scientific knowledge and our sense and our gut instincts to see something was happening and then act to make a difference. This is not a proud moment for me in my life, but this is Katie, the young girl who got married. She was a baby, and you know, Chick and I, when we were married, there was no family medical leave. You basically had the baby recovered for a week or two and then went back to work. And so one night Katie was crying, and so I tried to be the good husband. I said to Chick, "I'll get up with her." So anyway, 15 or 20 minutes later, Katie's still crying, and like a good OR nurse, she got up to see what was going on and documented it. But I had fallen asleep, and of course it was shown at every family party for years. But in my defense, I didn't drop her, right? I still held on to her. But we have the opportunity as nurses to be there when life happens, and also to be maybe the last person caring for someone when they pass. I had this moment where I was called out and there was an ectopic pregnancy. And this woman had been struggling to get pregnant for years. And so when the abdominal pain started happening, she was ignoring it because she didn't want to worry about losing this baby that she's been desperately trying to have. Anyway, it ruptured her fallopian tube. So she was in a bad state. And we were rushing to get the surgery done. So I didn't really have time. I was scrubbed. I didn't really have time to look at the chart. But anyway, in my faith, at the time, you couldn't go to heaven unless you were baptized. And so when the fetus was passed to me and was put in a specimen container, I thought, well, you know what? I don't know if she's Catholic or not. So I just took some water out of my sticks and I just kind of, I thought very discreetly, I did the baptism of the baby. And I thought, well, she's Catholic. Well, then that's good. The baby will be seen with their parents in heaven. If they're not Catholic, then it's just a little water on the fetus. Nobody's harmed. So anyway, the next day I get called into the manager's office and the manager said, what happened last night? And I said, nothing. We were called out for, a topic and everything's fine. She goes, well, they want to see you up on the OB unit. The perinatal coordinator wants to talk to you. So go on up. And I'm like, oh God. So I go up to the perinatal unit and the coordinator's waiting in the elevator lab. And she goes, the parents of the surgery last night want to talk to you. I'm like, why do they want to talk to me? And she goes, well, I told them you baptized their baby. And I'm like, why did you do that? She goes, well, I saw you do it. So I mentioned it to him. So anyway, my stomach now is turning in knots. So I walk into the room and here are you see devastation in these parents, right? They've lost this child that they wanted to. Tell Chick I'll call her when I get back. So they lost this child and they're devastated. And I'm standing there and my heart is beating. And the husband says to me, I heard you baptized our child. And, you got to be honest, so I said, yes, I did. And this guy is about 6'4", 250, he comes over and he gives me this bear hug and he lifts me up and he's like, thank you, thank you. And the mother starts crying and she says, we thought we would never see our baby again because it wasn't baptized. Now we know that when we pass, we'll meet him in heaven. And you can't imagine the mixture of sorrow and joy in that moment. But that's what a nurse did. Not that I didn't think I was doing anything special, but I tried to advocate for that child in the only way I knew how. But it made a world of difference to these parents who thought that they were never going to meet with their baby ever. And now they have hope for when that future comes. But that's what we do. We provide hope, right? We give patients the chance that somebody's going to fight for them. Someone's going to be there in the middle of the night or on a Sunday or on a holiday. Someone's going to be there for them and we're going to not give up on them to make sure that they get the care that they need. So as you go back into your practice and you think about nursing and what role it has, think about this opportunity that we are the last human being that someone's going to see before they take the greatest leap of faith in their life. I had one of my nurses was in the Army Reserve. She was sent to Afghanistan. And she told me when she came back, we were having lunch together when she came back. And I said, what's it like? She goes, what we did, what the nurses decided to do is whenever a helicopter landed with wounded soldiers, they would make sure that they were positioned at the head of the bed as they were wheeling the soldier into the operating room. And they would lean over and they would talk to him. Because she said, every soldier, when they're facing death, wants to hear or see their mother. And so we became their mother. So they knew that they could hear a female voice before they may not wake up again. She said, you would not know how many soldiers came back after they got healthy and talked to them about how much that meant. That someone was acting the role of their mother at a time when they were worried about living. I was on a plane ride to give a talk in Los Angeles, and I was ARN president at that time. And when you're president, you get to choose your logo, and that was my logo, for Congress in Louisiana. And the theme was celebrating our value. And so this woman sitting next to me in the first class cabin of the United Airlines plane says, well, what's this? You know, that's a nice picture. And so I said, oh, this is my logo. And it's a picture of an operating room nurse looking at someone before they go under anesthesia, because we are the last contact, because they take this great leap of faith that they're turning their body over to. And I'm like, you know, and so, you know, think about it. People are stripped of everything that identifies them as a human being, their clothing, their jewelry, their family and friends, and these turn over the control of their life to their strangers. And we get to be there with them when they take that leap of faith. And I sit back in my chair thinking, God, that sounds really good. I'm going to have to remember that. And I look over and this woman has tears just flowing down her face. Okay, 35,000 feet, first class cabin. I couldn't change seats with anyone. And so I'm like, did I do anything wrong? She goes, 25 years ago, I was rushed into an operating room because they thought I was losing my baby. She goes, I was laying there, I'm naked on this table with a thin sheet over me, and all these people are rushing around. And I'm laying there thinking, what's going on? Am I okay? Is my baby okay? Will I ever see my husband again? And she said, just then an anesthesia pose and nose piece was coming down over her. And she said, I said to myself, oh my God, this is it. And she looked at me and I could still remember the tears coming down. She goes, and I never felt more alone in my life. Then she said a hand came and pushed the mask away and said, hold on, I haven't had a chance to talk to her. She said, I felt someone grab my hand and touch my shoulders, and I see these two blue eyes looking at me. This person says, hi, my name's Mary. I'm going to be your nurse. We're really hurrying because we want to get your baby out, but I'm going to stay with you while you go to sleep. And she said, I went from feeling alone to feeling that I had a friend with me. Now, if we found Mary anywhere, hopefully she's on a golf course enjoying retirement, she would say, I didn't do anything special. I just advocated for my patient. A nurse did that. And 25 years later, on a first-class cabin of a plane, a vice president from Hewlett-Packard was crying unashamedly about the fact that we took a moment to advocate for them. When we talk about what we do as nurses, or as we look at what we do, the value is there if we look at the signs, right? That's what we should be celebrating. Yes, there's a lot of crap that's going on, excuse my French, but we don't have to pay attention to that. We can, at least we can do, okay, you know, most of the day you can do it, but stop every time periodically and think about the difference you make in people's lives. We have to advocate for ourselves before others will advocate for us. And that's part of being what we have to give ourselves the credit for what we do, right? We don't do cases, we help people live. There's a nurse, I gave a talk at Mayo Clinic up in Rochester. And after the talk, this nurse came up to me and she's a family nurse practitioner, the only family nurse practitioner for 250 miles in northern Minnesota. And she told me the story that she broke both her legs skiing as a 15-year-old girl, and she was begging the surgeon to let her go to the bathroom. And he said, learn to use the bedpan. Behind her was a nurse holding charts with just a stern look on her face. And as they went to leave, the nurse dropped the charts. The surgeon looked around and the nurse said, oh, go ahead, I'll catch up with you. She watched him leave the room and then she said, screw him. And she picked the girl up and she carried her to the bathroom. That nurse said, that young girl said, that's the day I decided I was going to be a nurse. Now, 20 years later or 15 years later, people in northern Minnesota have someone providing healthcare for them because some nurse realized how important it was for a 15-year-old girl to use the bathroom and not a bedpan. That's advocacy, right? So now we have our time. We have the opportunity to be advocates. We have the Georgia surgical smoke bill. We have places about people trying to replace us in our practice. We have leadership vacancies. You know, we are making such stride with advanced practice. We have over 60,000 nursing management positions vacant. And if we don't find nurses to take those, they're going to find that non-nurses. And then try to advocate for proper turnover time. Then try to advocate for allowing yourself to talk to the patient before they have surgery. Then try to advocate why we need to have RNs as circulators. You're going to have, we could have leaders who don't understand what our profession is about. We have to deal with the whole question about violence that's happening. Do you know healthcare workers are the #1 group of workers who are assaulted? You know, we have to somehow solve those problems. We have to be at the table to make sure that the nursing voice is represented as we do that. So, like a father time out, I'm Uncle Sam now, and I want you, it's our time as owners to step up. The #1 thing you can do is to keep advocating like you have been advocating for your patients. Don't let anybody stop you from being the advocate for those patients. And then advocate for yourselves, right? Make sure that we have proper sleep, you know, that you're not on call constantly and you have a chance to get a rest and you have a chance to get a break. Volunteer to be on hospital policy and procedure committees. Help shape the practice environment within your unit. And then advocate for the profession to make sure that we can keep it strong as we move forward into the next century. Winston Churchill, sorry, wrong quote. Albert Einstein said, insanity is doing the same things over and over again and expecting different results. So it's now time for us to think about new strategies and new ways to advocate. I was speaking in Germany. I went into the restroom and they had this sign up in every bathroom stall and urinal, basically asking men to use the facility a different way than they have been normally or traditionally use it. And the bathroom was not the cleanest bathroom I've ever seen. It was far from it. So I go back to the table and I took a picture of it and I showed it to the German nurses who took me out to dinner. And they're like, oh yeah, the German government has spent millions of marks putting these signs up because male bathrooms tend to be, you know, a little disgusting. And I'm like, yeah, I could see that. Clearly putting the sign up didn't work. So on my flight home, I stopped in the Netherlands and I went into the washroom there and I see this. And the Dutch didn't put signs up. They realized that men like a challenge. So they strategically put a fly where there would be less splatter and stains. And then we had something, a little target practice. And look how clean that bathroom is. So when we advocate, we have to speak in the language or in a way people can understand, right? We have to give, we can't, you know, yes, stop doing this, put a sign up, stop doing this, or go get vaccinated. Okay, yes, there's things, but we got to think of news because signs don't work. How many errors still happen, even though there's a big sign, you know, sitting somewhere? How many timeouts might still not happen, even though there's a sign in the operating room saying do the timeout? So we have to think of new strategies and new ways to do this if we're going to be effective advocates for our profession. So as we move forward, I want you to take 3 things from this talk to hold dear. Is to continue to look for opportunities to make a thin place for your patient. I hope my story has told you how our simple acts of caring mean the world to those who we're advocating for. Don't let anybody rob you of the joy of making a thin place for your patients. Knowing that you're doing that, I think can help us elevate the mood of our profession. You know, liberate your heart and celebrate what you do. No more 10 cataracts, 10 people get to see. And continue to pass the gift on and your passion for perioperative nursing to the next generation. I used to say to some of my more senior nurses who were acting as preceptors, I said, you know, when do you want your retirement party to happen? Do you want them to hold it the day before you retire, or do you want them to hold it the day after you retire? You know, day before, people are celebrating your career and your gift to them, helping them. The day after, they're celebrating your departure. Oh, thank God she's gone. I remember I was scrubbed for my first ever total joint. So those of you who do orthopedics, you know, you have the 10 trays piled up there. And I am looking at these trays and trying to get the instruments going, and I'm trying to keep bladder control because I'm thinking, God, if I screw up, this person's not going to walk again. And one of the orthopedic nurses, Colleen Pulowski, wherever you are, walks into the room and says, Bill's doing a total joint. Bill's doing a total joint. And I remember him holding these instruments saying, how is that in any way helpful? Right? I'm already feeling enough stress. Thank you, Colleen. And I'm sorry to say this, but I had this deep, dark desire that someday she needed a hip. And I would walk over and say, wish you taught me now, huh? But how many times have we seen nurses do that? Right? Let the young person struggle, and you know what? If you want to live forever, teach someone, because part of you then becomes in their practice. And when they teach someone, and if someone is likely who is taught, they were more likely to teach someone else, then you get past. Florence Nightingale is immortal because generations of nurses after nurses taught what Florence taught. You could be immortal by passing on your skill and your knowledge and your passion for the profession to the next generation. So when I went home and I told my parents, my dad was a Chicago police officer, my mom was a woman born way before her time, that I was going to become a nurse. I was going to transfer from pre-med into nursing. I remember my father saying, my son, the nurse, and my mom saying, it's fine, it's fine. But anyway, a couple of weeks later, she sent me a box of chocolate chip cookies and this poem from Robert Frost. I threw the poem in a drawer, I ate the cookies, life was good. Years later, I realized what she said. She was telling me that I was going to go on an amazing adventure. So I'm going to read you Frost's poem. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry, I could not travel them both. Hold on, I got to get glasses, showing my age here. All right, two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry, I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and perhaps having the better claim, because it was grassy and it wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Colleagues, at some point, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you chose the profession of nursing. You chose a profession that maybe 1/10 of the population in the world gets to see what we see. We get to touch people in the most intimate way possible. We get to have this unique creation. We've helped make it healthy so it can continue on making a difference in the world, and you have a hand in that. You chose the road less traveled by, and you are making all the difference in the world, and I'm honored to call you a colleague. Thank you very much.
Wait, I got one more thing to say. That was wonderful. Thank you. Needless to say, that was wonderful. And that was God calling on my phone, and he said it was okay for you to baptize the baby.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. That was a wonderful presentation, and I hope you got as much out of it as I did, and we will be able to take that forward and share his message with everyone that we come in contact with. It's now time for us to go have lunch with the vendors. And so enjoy the exhibits again, enjoy the lunch, and we'll see you back here at what time? I didn't bring my schedule up here. 1 o'clock. All right. Enjoy lunch and thank you. Oh, that was so good. Thank you. As always.